Hello, I'm Travis Klein, Assistant Director of Career Services here at Northwest Missouri State University. And today we're going to talk about making a resume, some of the basics that you need to know, some of the resources that we have in career services, and just some of the things we've heard from employers that are best practices to have the best possible resume. So as we get started here, if we look at the career services team. We are located in Admin 130, so that's on the first floor of the administration building, open Monday through Friday from 8 a.m. to 5 p.m. Certainly welcome you to come in if you have questions about resumes, cover letters, need help with a job or internship search, just have general career related questions, things like that. We're here to help and we want to do help you with those things. So again, Admin 130, Monday through Friday, 8 a.m. to 5 p.m. That's when you can come in and have a chat with us. We are also available outside of those hours, or if you're away from campus, say you're doing an internship or you're away for the summer break, something like that, you can always email us career@nwmissouri.edu. And then we have a lot of these resources on our website about resumes and cover letters and things like that. That's nwmissouri.edu/career. So however you want to reach out, we're happy to help you and answer these questions. So as we look at resumes, so first off, what is a resume? Students often will hear that they need one of these or they'll be doing the application process and they'll see that they need to do it. They may not exactly know what is meant by that term. So a resume is an application document that you turn in, typically contains education information about your previous work experience, telling the employer what you've done. It's often the first introduction the employer has to you. Applications typically all look the same. Resumes give you a little bit of freedom to kind of make it look the way that you want. It's a really good opportunity for you to explain to an employer why you're qualified for the position, why you're the best candidate, the person that they should talk to. And then the overall goal of the resume is for them to call you in for an interview so that you hopefully get that position, that internship, whatever it is. So that's what a resume is. And the rest of this presentation will talk about ways to make it stand out, to make it impactful, so that hopefully you do meet that goal of getting the interview and making a good first impression with the employer. So a few tips for resumes. So first, resumes are going to be unique for every position that you apply for. And a lot of times that's intimidating for students. You know, the idea of if I apply for 5 jobs, I need 5 different resumes. That is made much easier if you have what we call a master document. So this is somewhere, whether it be in your Google, in a drive online, on your computer, on a USB stick that you carry with you or have in your home office or desk or your residence hall or whatever, somewhere have access to a document that has everything that you've done, all the jobs that you've done, classes that you've taken, projects that you've worked on, activities that you're involved with, all of those sorts of things need to be listed in a master document. This can be very long. It could be 10, 12 pages sometimes if you've got a lot of stuff going on, but you want to keep track as you go of the things you're doing, because as you're making those individualized, tailored resumes, if you have everything laid out in a master document, it's much easier to grab from the master document and put into the specific resume. So keeping a master document, one of the earliest things you can do to make this application process, make resumes easier for you to do. Also, as you go about applying for things, pay very close attention to the job descriptions for the jobs and internships that you're applying for. They tell you everything you need to know about the job, and they give you hints on what's important to the employer for this specific position. So they will absolutely have bullet points of the requirements for the job, the preferred qualifications, the duties and responsibilities, all those sorts of things. That gives you a chance to kind of see those, and then when you make your resume, make sure that you're talking about those specific points. Makes it a lot easier to customize the resume if you use the job description as a guide. Also, the job descriptions typically go away after the job closes. So I would recommend saving those, whether that is exporting the page as a PDF, um, copying and pasting the text out of it into another document so that you have that later on. If you do get an interview after the resume, having the job description, to look back on as you go into that interview setting, that's a good way, again, to kind of know how they're going to be asking questions, what they're really trying to get out of those questions. So that job description is very powerful and really, really useful as you go about this process of making resumes. So use the job description as much as you can. That will certainly help. Also, anyone you have look at the resume, like whether you come to career services, if you have a friend or family member look at it, a faculty member, providing them the job description also helps because they can tell you how well you match up to it with that tailored resume that you've made. And then the final tip that is always a good idea is to proofread. If you're making a lot of resumes, it's very easy to miss small errors, things like that. So having as many people as possible look at the resume, check it over, make sure there's no typos, there's no grammatical errors, there's no things that, made sense in your head, but when you typed them out, maybe they didn't come out as clear as you wanted. Having somebody go through all of that will help. The volume of applications that people get for jobs and internships can be a bit overwhelming. Get hundreds of applications for a single position. So if an employer gets a resume that's full of typos, hard to read, the grammar's bad, they're usually just going to throw that resume out and move on to the next candidate. So you want to make sure that your resume is as perfect as possible. It's never going to be 100% perfect, but you want to make sure you're going through that, you're checking it, having other people look at it, making sure that it's as strong as possible. It takes a little bit more time, and does require, again, asking other people for help, but having it proofread, making sure that you've taken out all the errors that you can find. That's always the best way to be successful when you're applying for an actual job or an actual internship. Some quick do's and don'ts before we break down the different sections of a resume. So some things we certainly encourage you to do. So you want to make sure that your resume is very easy to read. These documents are gone through in a very quick manner through employers, typically 15, 20 seconds sometimes with these. So you want to make sure it's a big enough font. 10 to 12 points is good. Anything bigger than that is going to be hard for, it's going to look like you're trying to fill the page. So it's going to be hard to look like you're not, trying to fill the space. Smaller than 10 is going to be hard for people to read. So 10 to 12, typically a really good kind of body size font. In your heading, your name, stuff like that, that can always be bigger. But the main body text should be 10 to 12 point font. You also want to make sure it's a font that's easy to read, something that's, a pretty common font. You don't want it to be some crazy script font that looks like handwriting that someone's really going to struggle to read. You want to be careful with your margins. I would typically say if you're trying to fit something onto one page, the top and bottom margins are the ones to kind of play with a little bit. Don't manipulate the side ones. And you want to keep them uniform whenever possible. So 0.5 to 1 inch margins is a good idea. Using the presets within your word processor of a narrow margin or a normal margin, that's a good idea, but don't try and stretch it beyond that. It may make it format weird, may make it print funny, things like that. So you want to be careful with that. And then you want to be consistent with formatting. So if you are from Iowa and you spell out Iowa in your address, but then you go to do Missouri and you do MO, that's going to look funny on there. So if it's spelled out Iowa, spell out Missouri. If it's IA, then do MO. If it's capital I, capital A, do capital M, capital O. So consistency throughout the whole thing. That's really important. Same thing with dates. If you spell out the month and then do the year, do that consistently throughout, even if it's September versus May. So that consistency is really important. It's one of those things that someone goes through a resume that may not know exactly what's weird, but they'll notice that something's kind of off, and that's probably because of inconsistencies and formatting issues and things like that. Some things we would say not to do. So you want to avoid tables and graphs and things like that, overly complicated things that are hard to edit. Clip art and photos. Typically, you don't want to do that. A lot of companies will throw out a resume that's got a photo on it unless you're an actor and you're providing a headshot. So avoid putting your photo on there, even though some services that are out there may have a spot for the photo. Don't put a photo on there. That's not part of the resume process. Bullet points are what you want to use, not large paragraphs of text. So you want it to be concise and short and powerful. And we'll talk about building good resumes in a few slides here. But bullet points are certainly something that you want to make sure that you have, not big, long paragraphs of text that are hard to read. Because people, if they're giving you 15 seconds to look over your resume, they're not going to have time to read a big block of text. They will be able to read short bullets that get right to the point. You also want to be careful with colors and designs. It's fine to have a little bit of flair to it, but depending on your job and your industry, some may be more, more favorable towards overly designed resumes. Others may want a more traditional one. So know your industry, talk to your faculty members, talk to other classmates, things like that. Kind of know what's expected. Also, if you do an event like a mock interview day where you get a chance to talk directly with an employer, you can ask them about the types of resumes that they prefer. But, typically we find like a graphic design student, it's expected that their resumes have some design, have some, some very visual, strikingly features, to where an accounting major, they may want a more traditional resume. So definitely it depends on your industry and what they're actually looking for. All right, so talking about the resume itself, we're going to break it down into different sections and kind of talk about those and show a couple of examples of each of them. So first, you have your header. This is important. You got to tell them who you are. So it needs to be your name, contact information. I would say an email and a cell phone number are definitely a good idea on there. If you give your number on the resume, you want to make sure that you're answering the phone, that your voicemail is set up, that it's professional, things like that. Same thing with your email, be aware of your email address and what it says about you. Make sure you're checking the messages, maybe forward it to another account. I would avoid your student account on the resume, have it be a more personal account, even if that personal account forwards on to your student account, just because your student account will close once you graduate. Also, a good idea to have city, state, and zip. You don't need to provide a street address. They'll get that from the actual application itself, but city, state, zip just kind of shows them where you're from. So that could be your home address. It could be the Maryville local address that you have, whichever you prefer. But some kind of address that's city, state, zip is always good to put in the header section. Summary of skills. This is kind of a way for you to give them the back of the book description at the start of the resume. Tell them your top skills, qualifications you want them to know about that you'll elaborate on as you go further on, or maybe in your cover letter. You don't have to include this section, but it is a good way to kind of front load the resume with the information you think is the most impactful. And it also can help students who don't have a ton of experience fill up the whole page, which is a really important thing. You want to make sure you're filling up as much of a page of content as possible. If you go over, you want to make sure you're filling up 2 pages. So you want to make sure you're thinking about the presentation of the resume as well. And a summary of skills can be helpful with that. Education, you want to tell them about your degree, the classes that you're taking. If you have previous degrees, typically you don't need to include your high school education on here. But if you have an associate degree, if you have other, educational experience, technical school experience, things like that, that is good to put under education. Certifications can be put under here as well. You can also put related coursework that you've done. We find a lot of times like students in sciences will be trying for lab jobs. They may not have professional experience in a lab, but they've got a lot of classroom experience in a lab. Maybe they were a lab assistant, things like that. That can all be listed as related coursework under education, and that can be very helpful. So definitely want to let them know about your education. You can include GPA if it's above 3.0, but you don't have to. So education is good information to put on there. Really important to tell them about your previous experience. Sometimes students worry about jobs that are part-time jobs, food service, things like that, and how they don't relate. Your bullets, you can absolutely make those relate. This doesn't have to be everything you've ever done, but it's good to give them a snapshot of some of the experience you've had that you feel like prepared you for that job. And then finally, another optional one, but one that we encourage is involvement. So volunteer opportunities that you've done, organizations you've been a part of, different things like that. Definitely a good idea to include that. Kind of shows that you're more well-rounded, that you did more than just go to school. And that can definitely help. Again, depending on your major, some more so than others, but definitely worth the time if you have the space for it. So as we look at the header, so thinking about that, so what should you include? So again, your name is the most important thing on there. This is a document about you, right? So they need to be able to see who you are. So your name needs to be the most prominent and biggest text at the very top. They need to be able to see it, needs to be legible. It's really important that it's on there. So you have a little bit of a choice to make on how it looks. The font you use, is it all caps? Is it in a script font? Is it in a regular font? There's a little bit of creativity that you can put in there, but definitely want to make sure that they know who you are there on that first, the very top of the resume, right in the header. Again, contact information, city, state, zip is a good idea. Phone number, email address need to be there. Don't need that street address. They'll have that on the application. It's also a little bit of a safety thing not to put your street address on there. So definitely don't need to do that. If you have a LinkedIn profile, if you have a portfolio website, other things that you've done, those can absolutely be included there. Again, if you include it, you have to be okay with them looking at it. And then you want to make sure that if you do a cover letter and a reference page along with the resume, that the headers match so that they know these documents go together. So using a service like WiseDoc makes that really easy. But if you're using Google Docs or Microsoft Word or LibreOffice or something like that, there's a way to kind of get a consistent template between all three to where they look like they're matching documents. They're easy for them to see. So some examples of headers. So for Bobby Bearcat, we have top one's kind of plain, more traditional, very kind of safe to go with, although it does include LinkedIn information, which is helpful. Second one's a little bit more creative, has the nickname Bobby in there instead of just Robert. So same basic information there. And then the last one, a little bit more creative, uses kind of two columns there. Don't We don't typically recommend two columns for the overall resume, but for the header, it's absolutely fine to do that. But again, different ways to present the same information look very different, gives a very different message to the employer. So you have a little bit of flexibility on how you want to do that. All right, next talking about your summary of skills. So you want to, again, very highly customize this to the job description. That's the best thing that you can do. What are they asking for? What's at the top of those lists that they say for, preferred qualifications, things like that? That's a clue to you that those are the most important ones. So talk about those. Typically, we recommend bullet points for the summary of skills. 3 to 5 bullets is a pretty good place to start. Presenting those most relevant qualifications. Again, the things that they say ideal candidates would have or that are preferred qualifications, those sorts of things, those are the things you really want to hit on. It should be different for every resume that you do, every job application, because what they're looking for is going to be different every time. So this is a very tailored and customized part of the resume, but also really can be helpful to tell the employer you're the right choice for the position. And again, you want to be sure you're being as strong as possible. So put numbers in there, use strong action verbs. We'll talk about action verbs in a couple of slides here and give some examples of that, but you want to make sure you're using those. Lift those right out of the job description if you can. And then again, it should be the stuff that you think the employer needs to know about. The higher something shows up on the resume and in the document, the more important you're telling the employer you think it is. So if it's your contact information and then your summary of skills is the very important information you want them to know. So really good to do that. So we have an example of taking a job description and turning it into a summary of skills. So the sample qualifications from the job description talk about candidate being organized, have attention to detail, self-sufficient, and professional, and then that it allows for autonomy, that you have to be able to set tasks and prioritize your work, and then able to work on projects as a team. So turning that into a summary of qualifications, you could say that you're a highly organized college student with more than 3 years of bookkeeping experience at a local nonprofit organization. Probably not a paid position here, but something that's volunteer that's highly related. That is also something an employer wants to know. You can also tell them that you are, self-sufficient, detail-oriented by saying that you maintained a 3.75 college GPA while working 25 plus hours per week during the academic year. You're busy and you're successful. You're able to, complete tasks, do things on your own. This hits basically all 3 of those qualifications in one bullet in the summary of skills. So really powerful way to reinforce those professional skills and give them some important information right away. And then last one here, actively involved in several student organizations, holding leadership positions in both the Student Accounting Club and Student Senate. So again, showing that you can work on projects as a team because you're part of these organizations, but you're also autonomous. You've taken some leadership, which that kind of implies some professionalism. So again, hitting all 3 of the qualification things from the job description with one bullet in the summary of skills. So taking a little time and thinking about what you've done, what applies to these different things can really, really help make your summary of qualifications punch. And really, if I'm an employer looking for this position and I read these 3 bullets right away on a resume, I'm going to read the rest of it. You might get more than 15 seconds of my attention here because you've got me interested. So definitely taking a little time to craft these to make it as strong as possible pays off tremendously. So again, practice makes perfect. The more you do it, the easier it gets. And then we're here to help you craft those if you're struggling with that as well. But summary of qualifications can be a very, very powerful 3 to 5 bullets that really help kind of set you up for success with the employer. Typically, after your summary of skills or your introduction there, you would have your education. You're paying a lot of money for your college degree. You want to make sure you talk about it. So make sure you spell out the name of that degree. No BS, no BA. It's a Bachelor of Science, a Bachelor of Art. It's not plural. It's not possessive. So it's not a Bachelor's of Science degree. It is a bachelor's degree, but your individual degree is a Bachelor of Science in whatever. You typically do not do a date range for education. They don't need to know how long you were here, just when you plan to graduate. So if you're going to graduate, next spring, then it could be May 2020, whatever. You want to make sure you're telling them where you go to school. So the full name of the institution, including the city and state. Northwest Missouri State University is really well known kind of in the North Missouri region, but if you're applying for jobs in Chicago, they have Northwestern University, which is a very different type of school than ours. So make sure you tell them Northwest Missouri State University, Maryville, Missouri, so they know exactly where you're coming from and what you're doing. Again, if your GPA is over a 3.0 on a 4-point scale, you can include that if you want to. I think that's always a good way to show. Again, can show that you're successful and busy and able to manage multiple things at once. Um, a lot of students are like, do I do my cumulative GPA, my major GPA? Which one do I do? It doesn't matter. Just pick one. Whichever one's more favorable is typically the one I would say to do, but it doesn't really matter. International students, it is important to convert any non 4.0 scale GPAs to a 4-point scale. So if you come from a university previously that used a 10-point scale or something else, make sure you're taking the time to convert it to 4.0 because the employer won't take the time. So they don't know what a 7.75 out of 10, how that equals a 4.0 because it's not an easy conversion. So take the time, you do it for them. That way it's easy to understand. Again, high school information typically doesn't need to be on there. Anything that didn't lead to a degree or certification, you're not required to put on there, but you may choose to. Definitely, though, if you did get like a transfer degree, if you came in with an Associate of Arts, Associate of Science, things like that, make sure that those are listed on there. So some different ways the education can look. So just a straight up bachelor student, you want to spell out Bachelor of Science in Accounting, graduate April 20, whenever. Northwest Missouri State University, Maryville, Missouri, major GPA 3.75 out of 4. So the student chose the major GPA because it was better than the overall GPA, and that's fine. If you have a minor, you can include that too. So here we have Bachelor of Science Accounting with a minor in psychology. Again, same thing, same way that they listed everything else. And then we do have double majors, students that do that. So you can say Bachelor of Science double major, accounting and English. If you have a Bachelor of Science and a Bachelor of Arts, you can do Bachelor of Science accounting, Bachelor of Arts English. Probably use 2 lines in that case, but that's okay. So many different ways you can do it. There are a lot of other ways that this can be listed. Our ultimate guide that I'll link to at the end of this presentation and show you where to find it. It goes through multiple ones. So if you have an associate degree, if you have, a bachelor's degree from one institution and a master's from another. So lots of different ways that you can show education, but you want to make sure anywhere you got a degree, you're representing somewhere on that resume. Experience is certainly important to put on there. This is going to tell them, what you've done previously that's gotten you ready to do. Most recent job should be first, and then going to the older one, you want to include your job title, the employer, the city, the state, and then this is where you want the date range. Because if you only work a job for a week, that is not the same as when you do for a year, as you do for 5 years, as you do for 10 years, whatever. So you want to make sure you're giving them the date range with experience, but not with education. 3 to 5 bullets per experience is the best way to go. Again, you want to make sure you're really focusing in on what they're looking for in the job description, speaking directly to that, using numbers, those strong action verbs, things like that. You want to make sure that you're doing that whenever possible. This does not have to be job experience. So it doesn't have to be paid. It could be you had an unpaid internship, you volunteered somewhere, you do the books at a local nonprofit, like all that sort of stuff. If it applies to the job, it should be listed under experience. And again, you want to make sure that you're using numbers and percentages whenever possible, especially if it deals with people or money. That is very powerful. So put that on there. And then you want to watch your tense. Anything you're presently doing, talk about in the present tense. Anything you did in the past, you talk about in the past tense. You don't want to mix those up because, again, if you're reading it, something's going to seem not right. You may not know exactly what it is, but it's just going to look funny. So pay attention to the tense that you use when you talk about your experience. Present experiences are present tense, past or past tense. So again, some examples of different things that you can do. So this student had worked as a supply chain intern. So you start with the job title, then the dates of employment, and then where you did it, and then city, state, and then your bullets. And you can see that they, reviewed and reconciled more than 150 invoices and purchase orders per week to identify the price. So using strong numbers there, giving a kind of a how much work was involved in that there. The other one is, a cashier at Hy-Vee, again, talking about the number of customers per day, making sure that the cash register was 100% accurate at the end of every shift, different things like that. So again, trying to use those professional skills that apply to it. You don't want your bullets to talk about job duties. You want them to be skills and things that are relevant to the job you're applying for. So you don't have to say that you worked the checkout. You want to talk about that you provided customer service because that's going to relate to what they're asking for, or that you were responsible for the opening and closing balance of the register, that you monitored the checkout stations to make sure that there wasn't theft, things like that. So That's the sort of stuff you want to talk about instead of ran cash register. So again, try and go a little deeper, not the task of the job, but the actual individual skills and things like that that you've done. So I've mentioned action verbs a few times. So what I mean with that, those are the words that you use to start off the bullet. So instead of worked, 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 you want to talk about that you managed, that you were responsible for, that different things like that. And again, the best place to find these is in the job description because they're going to list that you need to collaborate with 5 people. So if you did a team project, you collaborated with X number of people on a team project for this class in the semester of whatever. So trying to use those same words that will help make the employer make those connections as they go through and read your resume. Plus, then you don't have to think of them on your own. You want to avoid repeating them. So again, no manage, manage, manage. By the time they get to the third or fourth managed bullet, they're probably going to feel like they've read that story already, so they may skip it over. So try to not repeat them if possible. On our website, we have a whole big list of different ones, and they break down into different areas. You can definitely, again, if you can't find enough of them in the job description, going to the website, doing that, using thesaurus.com, things like that, all those sorts of things are super helpful. But again, we have a good long list of them on our website under career-student/resume actionverbs.htm. And then quickly want to talk about the bullet points because they are literally the most important part of the entire resume. So again, don't just think about the task, think about what you did, the outcome that was produced, the skills that you use, the things the employer really wants to know. This is your chance to really show how everything connects. So if you worked at McDonald's, you don't have to tell me that you worked the drive-through, you prepared food, you mopped the bathroom. I know what someone that worked at McDonald's did, but I want to hear about teamwork, about communication, about customer service, about time management. Those are the things that make that job at McDonald's apply for my customer facing internship or job that you're applying for. So think about those sorts of things. And again, just like in the summary of qualifications, you want to look very closely at that job description. What are the things they're asking for? What have you done before? How can you tell them that you have that skill? And we do have, again, on our website and in our ultimate guide, there is this kind of worksheet that you can use to write bullets that will help you make much stronger bullets. So think about what you did, how you did it, why you did it, and then any kind of numbers you can throw into it. So like a student that worked at the newspaper here on campus, the Northwest Missourian, or for student publications, they may sell spots for advertising to local employers. So they do that by contacting local businesses and asking them if they want to buy things. They do it to try and increase the sales. And then if they were successful, maybe they had like a 25% sales increase. So they can turn those things into a bullet point that says conducted weekly advertising sales throughout Maryville and the surrounding areas for newspaper, yearbook, radio, and television spots, increasing advertising sales by 25% from the previous year. So again, if I'm the employer, I know exactly what you did. I know that you were successful. You gave it, a 25% raise. You're familiar with media, different things. You're familiar with the Northwest Missouri area. You've gone out, you've beaten the streets. You've kind of talked to these folks. That's going to make you a way more attractive candidate to me than somebody who campus media sold advertising spots. That doesn't really tell me anything. So tell me more details, things like that. The next one, maybe an education student worked as a reading tutor in the student support services area in the library. So they spent 30 minutes each with each student 3 times per week to improve reading proficiency. And they had 6 students, 30 minutes per week. So they tutored 6 students, spending 30 minutes per week with each student, improving reading proficiency by an average of 2 steps over the academic year. So from fall to the end of the spring. So again, tells me a lot more than tutored in the student services center. So that's kind of a really basic like tasky bullet, but tutored 6 students, giving me the time, telling me that they were 2-step improvement, tells me so much more information. So spending a little bit of time thinking about each bullet, and again, there's 3 to 5 per job. So this takes a little bit of time. But doing this like on your master document with all of your jobs, then when you go to apply, it's very easy to kind of pull those into that overall resume. So a little bit of work up front, going to have a lot of payoff in the end, hopefully for you. And then finally, thinking about involvement, things that you're doing outside of class. Are you in activities? Are you involved in things in the community? Are you volunteering different places? Things like that. That can really demonstrate to employers that you're doing more than just going to class, that you're kind of being involved, that you're giving back. A lot of companies, that's a big initiative for them company-wide, is somebody to give back, to volunteer, things like that. Some of our majors like human services, it's very important. So it can be very relevant to your career. So, sometimes you want to put this under experience, but definitely having it under involvement again shows that you're a little more well-rounded than just going to class, just maybe working a campus job or something like that. So involvement is very important. If you had an elected or appointed position, some kind of leadership thing, you want to make sure you include that title and a description of what you did. A couple bullets would be a good idea. Um, Involvement's important to be on there, but if you've got a bunch of experience, different education, things like that, this could be one of the first ones that go to. But I do think it is important to do. So some examples of ways that you can show this. So first, we had somebody who was involved in, one of our fraternity sorority life organizations. They were in Lambda Pi Eta. They were a member for a while. Then they were the secretary. And then while they were secretary, they recorded detailed, accurate minutes. They communicated weekly with the 45 members. So again, giving some good information, some context to the employer instead of just saying Lambda Pi Eta and dates. And then the next one was a student who was involved with Big Brothers and Big Sisters of Nottoway County. That's a really good one to put on there. Talking about the one-on-one relationships at the Little, playing and participate in activities, and then tutoring at Eugene Field Elementary School for a couple hours per week. Lots of really good information, say for an education major, a human services, a psychology student, right there in that volunteer thing. Again, I would probably put that under experience instead of under involvement, but really good information for the employer to have. So think about, again, the things that you've done. Having this all on the master is a very good idea. It may or may not make it into the individual resume, depending on what else you have, but definitely keeping track of these sorts of things outside of class, organization, volunteer work, really, really helpful for you to have as well. All right, thinking about the resume more as a document. So when it comes to naming and saving your document, you want to make sure you're very intentional about how you do that. If you're making a custom resume for every job and you just call it resume 1, resume 2, resume 3, resume 4, going to be really easy to attach the wrong one. And then the employer never sees that hard work you did. They just see a resume that doesn't apply for them and they'll probably skip over it. So we recommend using your name, the position title, maybe even a date. So maybe it's, Career Ambassador Fall 2026 is what you put on there. And then, that when you apply for it, that's the resume that gets attached to that application. So thinking about that, it also makes it easier for the employer to find the document if your name is on it. So maybe it's Travis Klein, Career Ambassador Fall 2026. That's a long name, but that's also everything you need to know is right there in the name of it. If possible, save your resume as a PDF. Don't send the Word document. Don't send the Google Doc document or the open document format or whatever. PDF is a locked format, so it looks the same on a computer screen as it does on a laptop, as it does on a phone, as it does on an iPad. So you never know how an employer is going to look at it. So a PDF kind of makes it locked in place and looking one specific way. And you can very easily export to PDF in all the major kind of softwares that make resumes now. And then again, never hurts for an employer to see your name, so making sure that it's in that name is not a bad idea at all. Some other things to think about. AI is certainly becoming kind of a buzzword, lots of things like that. Students are using AIs to create resume, whole cloth. We would not recommend that. It's fine to kind of use it for ideas or use it to kind of help you come up with phrases and things like that, but it should not be your final draft. You shouldn't just have Chat GPT make a resume and that's what you apply with. That's AI generated stuff reads like AI generated stuff. And it's going to be very apparent to the employer that you didn't spend the time to do this. So AI is a tool, but it should not be the be all end all and should not replace doing this work because this work is important. It's helpful. It also helps you kind of learn these skills so that when you go to make the next resume, it's even easier. If you're relying on AI, you're not going to do that. So again, they're going to be able to tell if it's generated text from AI. So we would recommend, it's okay once in a while, but don't use it for your entire resume. Give it your own kind of polish after it comes through. That way it's not obviously generated by AI. And again, some students get really frustrated that they fill out an online application and that exact same information is asked for in a resume or it's already in their resume and they have to submit the resume, but then they have to put it in. A lot of times, again, these things can be tests. So they want to make sure people are following the directions, and anybody that doesn't follow the directions, they can automatically take them out of the candidate pool. So if I have 200 people apply for my job, and 100 of them don't fill out the application. That's 100 applications I don't even have to look at. So make sure, even though it can seem like it's cumbersome, it's a pain to do, make sure you're following the directions. They're there for a reason. So, make sure that you're doing that. If you would like more information about any of these things, you would like to see, more detailed information about each section, things like that, we do have our ultimate resume and cover letter guide available on our website as a downloadable PDF. You can find that at nwmissouri.edu/career under students. And then there's a resume and cover letter page, and it's linked right there. We also have paper copies available in the Career Services office. If you come in to have a resume or cover letter review or to get help with that, we'll probably give you one of those copies before you leave, but it's always available on our website under students on there. Another really helpful tool as you go through this process to make resumes can be WiseDoc. So this is software you log into with your Northwest username and password. You put in your information, you pick your template, and it makes a really nice looking resume. You can make a matching cover letter. So really good service to kind of take the work out of making the resume look good. Sometimes students don't struggle with content. They struggle with the formatting. They struggle with the templates. WiseDoc can kind of take care of all of that for you. So it is a gift service that Career Services provides all Northwest students with. So single sign-on with your Northwest account information. There's also some AI tools in there, resume reviews, things like that. There's some LinkedIn information. So WiseDoc is a really helpful tool as you go through the process of making resumes and cover letters. And then if you're going to use a resume, you're going to have to find jobs and internships to apply for. So we do have Hire a Bearcat as a social media site on Facebook and Twitter. It's just at Hire a Bearcat on both platforms. We highly recommend students who are starting the job and internship search process follow those. We post a lot of stuff onto Hire a Bearcat throughout the academic year, even over the summer. So if you're starting to look for a job or internship, that is certainly a recommended follow. And then we do have a lot more information about resumes, cover letters, again, links to the ultimate guide, different things like that. Those can be found on our website at nwmissouri.edu/career. Most of the stuff you want is going to be under the student tab, but definitely good information for you there. And then if you are applying for things and linking to your LinkedIn profile or your other social media accounts, you can get a professional headshot using our new selfie studio. That's available in the Owens Library over by the International Office. There's a backdrop, there's good lighting, so you can use your phone and take a nice profile picture. That can be very helpful as you go through this process as well. No cost for this. You don't have to swipe your Bearcat card or anything. It's just set up there and available for you to use as long as the library is open. So certainly encourage students to do that. And then finally, Career Services has a lot of social media accounts, and we certainly would welcome you to follow us on all the popular platforms. We'll have resume tips, things that we share throughout there, employers that are coming to campus to recruit, events like mock interview days and career days where you can use this resume, kind of get some feedback from employers on the resumes. So definitely a lot of good stuff on those social media accounts. All right, so that was a little bit about resumes. So again, hopefully this gets you started. The website and the Ultimate Guide has a lot more information for you, so certainly encourage you to use that. We will have a link to that in the description of this video where you can find that and find more information on our website on the tools and services that we have. But of course, if you have questions, you're always welcome to come into the office, admin 130, to ask those, again, Monday through Friday from 8 to 5. If the university is open, the Career Services office is typically open. And then you're also always welcome to email us at career@nwmissouri.edu. So good luck with resume creation with your job and internship search. And if Career Services can help in any way, please let us know. Thank you and have a great day.